Hey, I decided to do something pretty fun, in my opinion. I'm somebody who used to or I used to do. I read fan fiction from time to time, and I was wanting to show you some of my favorites, and I was thinking it'd be cool if I ended up, uh, voicing fan fiction or fiction, whatever, like these stories that were my favorites that I read. Let me know what you think. Okay. So, this is one of my favorites. I've reread it so many times, and I thought everybody should read it or know of it at some point. It's called Just Off the Key of Reason by iamapanda. It's on fanfiction.net, or was, but the author rewrote it into a book without the characters who were from Glee. Actually, it's a Faberi fanfic, and it's really wholesome and thoughtful, and I've thought about it a lot. My just time I've existed. You know what I mean? So I'll read the description for you too. For Barry, a future fic, Rachel Berry is a successful Broadway star with a new roommate, the very old, naive Queen Fabray. It starts with a note on her fridge and a childishly scrawled doodle of an elephant. Everybody has a little crazy in them. It's rated T, English, 30 chapters, 128,000 words. It was uploaded on February 11th, 2012. Alright. Just Off the Key of Reason. Chapter 1. You Are the Dreamer. Hi, this is Quinn, your new roommate. I moved my stuff in this morning. I guess you were at work, but, I wanted to leave you a note so you didn't think someone did the opposite of rob you or something. Anyway, I went to get groceries. Quinn. Oh, and if you aren't Rachel Berry, please tell her. Thank you. Well, the note on Rachel's fridge was certainly unique, she had to admit. The first thing she thought when she caught sight of all the new stuff scattered around her apartment was, oh my god, somebody broke in and gave me all their belongings. Then she regained her ability to think rationally, and remembered that her new roommate was joining her today. And dear god, she left one of the stove burners on that morning after breakfast. Her new roommate was Quinn Fabray, who apparently wrote in a childish scrawl that floated up and down the page, even on lined paper. She had drawn an elephant doodle in the bottom right-hand corner, and stuck the note to the fridge using a mini stuffed horse with magnetic feet that Rachel had never seen before. Of course, Rachel approved, though. Adorable things were her forte. She patted it on the head with a smile. The building's landlord had been the one to find Rachel a roommate, as she was too busy with rehearsals to scour the streets in New York for somebody to fill the space of her ex-roommate. She knew she had driven the previous occupant around some sort of bend, what with her singing and talking and purchasing of a hyperactive golden retriever puppy with an affinity for shoes. In the end, either Barnaby or the roomie had to go, which is why Barnaby was now bounding out of Quinn's room, tongue lolling and eyes bright.
Oh god, Rachel thought. He must have destroyed something. Rachel didn't really want to enter Quinn's room. She wasn't some nosy spy or anything, really. She was just loud and annoying, according to other people. But she definitely didn't want her new roommate to come home to find her most prized possessions in slobbery shreds on the bedroom floor. So she pushed the door further open and stepped inside, right into fucking Wonderland. Quinn had obviously completely unpacked, as in no boxes were present, But holy mother of God, how could a room be so cluttered when it had been occupied for less than a few hours? Rachel stood in the doorway, dazed, just taking it all in and patting Barnaby absently on his happy head for not wrecking anything. Rachel took in the patterns and colourful bedding full of blue and green and orange and yellow. There were matching purple lamps on the desk and side table, and there were, there were 4 bookcases along the walls, filled to critical mass. Rachel actually feared for Quinn's safety. She didn't want to be awakened in the middle of the night to find a roommate dying under a 4-ton bookcase full of crap. Rachel couldn't resist walking closer to examine the quote-unquote crap. Most of it was actually books, multiple copies of classics that looked well-worn and falling apart. She counted Gulliver's Travels and Alice in Wonderland, everything by C.S. Lewis and Roald Dahl and Dickens, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Black Beauty, and Sherlock Holmes. Rachel moved on, trailing her fingers lightly over their spines, and looked at the rest of the clutter. She briefly wondered if Quinn was a hoarder. Her eyes widened. Oh God, they'd end up on TV, and Rachel would be the clueless roommate who had enabled Quinn to live in an unsanitary mountain of junk for an inordinate amount of time. She'd be the one breaking down into tears, convincing Quinn to just let that damn napkin go. Except, Quinn's stuff really wasn't junk. It was fantastic. Rachel loved the shelf full of snow globes and hourglasses and pencil sharpeners. She loved the collection of hacky sacks and the small blue piggy bank on the desk. The flock of miniature ceramic animals watching from one of the bookcases reminded Rachel of her own childhood. She smiled softly when she caught sight of the worn, faded, and slightly balding teddy bear sitting in the center of the bed, covers pulled up over him. Hi. Rachel had never jumped so high in her life. She spun around and clutching her heart tightly to find a woman with choppy blonde hair standing in the doorway, now looking slightly anxious and apologetic. Sorry, Quinn said, smiling nervously and petting an ecstatic Barnaby on his head. I didn't mean to scare you. Rachel didn't know where her words had gone. She did have a fully functional vocabulary, really. It had just vanished. Quinn was shifting back and forth, now focused solely on Barnaby. She wouldn't look at Rachel in the eyes. No, it's okay. I promise I wasn't, being a creeper, Rachel rushed. Barnaby likes to eat things he shouldn't. I just wanted to make sure. Well, your room is amazing, Quinn flushed. Hopefully this was actually Quinn. This was the perfect start to a murder in a procedural TV show. Stalk Broadway star, act shy and aloof, violently kill in front of cute dog. You are Quinn, right? Rachel asked, panicking for a moment. Quinn nodded and smiled, meeting Rachel's eyes briefly before returning to Barnaby. She appreciated the dog, at least. Rachel tilted her head and studied them. Barnaby rolled over, and Quinn squatted down to rub his tummy, speaking to him under her breath. Have you seen Hello, Dolly? Rachel asked, focusing on the dog would be the best way to get Quinn's attention. Quinn glanced up and shook her head. Rachel smiled softly at her. She didn't want to scare the woman off this soon. It's a wonderful film with Barbra Streisand. There are these 2 characters who sort of work together, Barnaby and Cornelius. Rachel walked over and kneeled down on Barnaby's other side. Quinn watched her feet. I thought it would be a cute name for a dog, Rachel continued, waiting to see if the girl was going to speak again. I'm glad you like him. Most strangers do, but roommates don't. Quinn looked up and met Rachel's eyes for a moment. She looked confused. Why wouldn't anyone like him? Rachel chuckled and ruffled Barnaby's ears fondly. Well, like I said, the reason I was in here was to make sure he hadn't destroyed anything. He likes to eat shoes and pillows and DVD players. Quinn grinned and her teeth showed, and Rachel's heart fluttered. This new girl really was beautiful. Rachel stood up and Quinn watched her knees. Come on, I'll help you put your groceries away. We can get to know each other, Rachel offered hopefully. Quinn nodded and stood up, following Rachel into the kitchen, where several shopping bags and a keychain with Scooby-Doo on it sat on the counter. Rachel watched surreptitiously as Quinn quietly emptied some of the bags and started putting things away. Chocolate milk, Fruit Loops, can of SpaghettiOs, Lucky Charms. She had to refrain from wincing at some of the dietary choices this woman was making. So, Quinn, what's your favourite food? Rachel figured it was as good a place to start as any. Quinn's voice was so light that Rachel had to focus to hear it. Macaroni and cheese. Rachel lit up, spinning around with a grin. I know how to make that. I mean, I'm a vegan, so the vegan version, but it tastes amazing. I could make it tonight if you'd want. I promise you'll like it. Quinn nodded slowly. Okay. She hesitated and then met Rachel's eyes again. What's yours? Your favourite food, I mean. Quinn chuckled at Rachel's thoughtful expression. Pizza and lasagna. Oh, and spaghetti with homemade sauce. Rachel mused, so many options. Oh, wait, curry from the green mango. It's just pure bliss. Heaven. I don't know. Have you tried it? Rachel was desperately trying to control her word vomit. So far it was a success, but this woman didn't seem like the type to forcibly cut her off anytime soon, to just say, Jesus Christ, shut the fuck up, woman. You're driving me crazy. Quinn shook her head. You should introduce me. Oh, definitely. They saved me when rehearsals run late. I think I would starve if it wasn't for them. Quinn closed the cabinet and turned to face Rachel. What is it? I mean, I know you're on Broadway, but what do you do? Quinn was looking at and playing with the fading green polish on her fingers, while Rachel watched her calmly, lips quirked slightly up. Have you seen Funny Girl, Quinn? Quinn shook her head. Rachel smiled at her. Well, we need to educate you on Barbra Streisand immediately. Funny Girl is the story of Fanny Bryce and Nicky Arnstein, the evolution of the relationship in Fanny's career. Comedy, romance, drama. Rachel swayed around the kitchen, hands gesturing vaguely around to make her point. She came to stop next to an intrigued Quinn and looked her right in the eyes. I play Fanny. You must be really talented, Quinn said, slightly awed. Rachel flushed. Well, you should come and see for yourself. What do you do? Quinn looked back down at the ground. I mean, you don't have to tell me, Rachel rushed. It's okay. I don't have a job or anything. My aunt's paying for me to live here. Rachel nodded and waited, but Quinn didn't continue. She ducked her head a little to catch the taller woman's eyes. What do you like to do, aside from blatantly ignoring the legendary works of Barbara? Quinn smiled. Maybe she's not as extraordinary as you think. Okay. Well, this was a stranger. It would not do to fly off the handle in a rage. Rein it in, Rachel. Keep it together. You can still save this person from the Barbara ignorance. Quinn must have noticed Rachel's jaw drop, her expression of pure horror, and rushed to speak. Or she is. Extraordinary, I mean. I wouldn't really know. I like animals. Rachel's expression morphed from horror to amused confusion. Were those two statements linked? You like animals? Yeah, form and function, aesthetically, animals in every way. Also, literature. Rachel nodded. Oh yeah, I saw all your books. It's so cool, you have so many. Quinn grinned and maintained eye contact. I like old bookstores and sort of pick up random things from thrift stores, flea markets, yard sales. If you couldn't tell. Rachel laughed and opened the cabinet to pull out the ingredients for vegan macaroni. Barnaby came bounding in, and Quinn beamed when he jumped up onto her, rubbing up and down his sides affectionately. Rachel smiled at them. Do you want to take him for a walk? There's a park I go to a couple blocks down. Quinn glanced up. She looked nervous. Really? Sure. He loves you. Obviously more than me. Rachel glared exaggeratedly at Barnaby's direction, and Quinn pressed her lips together in a smile. Okay. Rachel gladly handed over the leash and watched as Quinn hooked it carefully into the collar before being dragged out the door by the excited golden retriever. Rachel smiled to herself and took a deep breath. That had been interesting. Quinn was refreshing, maybe a little nervous and naive, but kind. She seemed like a dreamer. Rachel liked dreamers. She wondered where the woman had come from. Frankly, Rachel had surprised herself by not voicing every single question that popped into her head. Why won't you look me in the eye? Why are you so quiet? Why is your aunt paying for you? Why do you look like you descended from heaven itself? Hopefully, she refrained from scaring the first roommate she had that didn't hate Barnaby with every fibre of her soul. Quinn came back through the door about 20 minutes later, and Barnaby ran straight over to his water bowl, tail wagging wildly. "Hey, Barnes, were you a good boy?" Rachel asked, directing her question at Quinn, who walked through the living room and into the kitchen after him. Quinn smiled. "He was wonderful. Do you need help?" "It's pretty much finished. It just has to go in the oven for 10 minutes. We could watch a movie or something," Rachel offered. "Can we watch, no, never mind, actually." Rachel watched Quinn fidget with her hands again. "No, what is it?" Quinn hesitated and looked at Rachel's feet. "Well, you're probably sick of Funny Girl, right? I was gonna say we could." "Sick of Funny Girl?" Rachel's jaw dropped open and her hands flew into the air. "God, no, never. Quinn, if I ever say I'm sick of Funny Girl, I want you to take care of Barnaby for me and take me into a nice mental facility, okay?" Rachel had visions of not nice mental facilities giving her electroshock therapy and locking her in a tower a la Shutter Island. Quinn snorted and then flushed, covering her nose. Rachel just laughed. "Will you watch it with me, Quinn?" Quinn nodded, still red on the face, and made her way to the couch with Rachel right behind. Line break. "So," Rachel looked expectantly at Quinn 3 hours later. "Did you like it?" Rachel tried to tell herself that this wouldn't make or break the potential friendship-roommate bond. She tried, but she failed. Quinn tapped the pins she had been playing with against her thighs like drumsticks. She smiled hesitantly. "I think I'd like your version better." Rachel tilted her head with a grin, and Quinn flushed under the gaze. "I like you." Quinn's ears were crimson as she twirled the pins around her fingers. Thank you?" Rachel laughed. "I mean, I think I scare people, but you don't seem like I'm driving you crazy yet. Plus, Barnes has been drooling on you for half an hour and you haven't shoved him off the couch, so perfect roommate." Gwen tried to control her grin for a moment. "I think I scare people too." Rachel smiled softly and then reached over the gap between the couch and the love seat for the pins in Gwen's hands, looking coaxingly into hazel eyes to get the woman to hand them over. Gwen did, then folded her hands in her lap. "Why do you think you scare people?" Rachel asked curiously. Quinn shrugged and laughed, sort of self-deprecatingly. "I don't know. People think I'm weird or crazy or something. I probably come across that way." Rachel studied the woman who was now playing with the rubber bands around her wrists, hazel eyes not meeting brown. "You're not any weirder or crazier than me. And I'm basically psychotic, Quinn." Rachel was being completely serious. Quinn laughed. "Really, I lost all my marbles in high school and they just never came back." Rachel continued, smiling. "I talk constantly. I sing Disney songs while I cook and dance with my vacuum cleaner. Last Halloween, I made 12 jack-o'-lanterns, one for each member of my cast at the time. That's 12 pumpkins, Quinn. Everybody's a little crazy." Quinn couldn't control her smile. Though it was shy and closed-mouthed, she met Rachel's eyes and Rachel beamed back, then yawned, scrunching up her nose in displeasure. She was having fun now. She missed having a roommate to pester all night. "I think I'm going to go to bed now. Do you want the remote?" Quinn shook her head and stood up. "No, me too. Good night, Rachel." Rachel handed Quinn's pins back to her with a wink. "Night, Quinn. Sleep well in your new room." Line break. Rachel had said she was going to bed more out of habit than out of belief that she would actually be getting some sleep. Funny Girl and gorgeous new roommates unfortunately weren't the cure for insomnia. This is why, only 2 hours after going to bed, she was awake to hear the creak outside her bedroom door. She really didn't want to admit that her first thought was, "Oh fuck, she really is crazy." Rachel lay still for a minute, but then she heard another creak and then the telltale signs of light footsteps down the hall. She climbed out of bed and went over to the door and opened it quietly. Quinn was standing outside her own door down the hall. She looked anxious and unsure, not really enthusiastic about going back into her room. She had that stuffed bear that had definitely seen better days hanging from one of her hands. "Quinn," Rachel Stage whispered to not terrify the woman. She walked fully out into the hall and towards the blonde. Quinn looked towards her with wide eyes, obviously surprised. "Did you need something?" Rachel asked. "Are you okay?" She was really asking, "Were you planning on killing me in my sleep?" Rachel just wanted to help. Quinn looked so confused and scared. Quinn hesitated, then seemed to realize she was holding a bear, moved it so it was sort of hidden behind her back. She flushed and nodded. Rachel noticed her movement and just smiled softly at her. Are you sure? I know it's a new place. What's that sound? Quinn interrupted. Rachel stopped and listened, eyes dotting around. She registered a faint groaning from up above. Oh, it's just the pipes. The building's kind of old, you know. Quinn nodded. Does it stop? She asked quietly. I don't think so. You just get used to it after a while. I used to have sound-canceling headphones, but they cancelled the sound of my alarm, so that was a disaster. It was actually more than a disaster. She had woken up at noon, having missed half a rehearsal, and panicked when she thought she had gone completely deaf and would never be able to sing again. It gave her chills to think about. Quinn laughed nervously and moved to get back to her bedroom door. Okay, sorry if I woke you. Rachel smiled. No worries, you didn't. Will you be okay? Yeah. Good night, Rachel. Again. Quinn smiled at the floor and shut her door quietly. Rachel lingered to make sure all was well before returning to her room, and then she crawled into bed with Barnaby and tried to remember what it was like when she first heard the groaning of the pipes. She'd been absolutely terrified. And that's the end of Chapter 1. You Are the Dreamer. On to Chapter 2. 1 Foot in Your Bedroom. When Rachel woke up before the crack of dawn, she got ready quietly in a sleep-hazy blur and grabbed coffee and a banana from the kitchen before heading out the door. Rehearsals went smoothly, despite the increasing bossiness that seemed to overtake her body when she was tired, and she definitely thought they were ready for opening night. They got off early evening, and Rachel got a smoothie from her favorite place before heading home. She thought about texting Quinn to see if she wanted one, but realized she didn't have the woman's number. So, being the awesome and generous person she was, she got Quinn one anyway. Rachel walked through the door, not really knowing whether to expect Quinn to be home or not. She went through the entryway and into the living room and smiled when she got sight of Quinn curled up in a ball, fast asleep on the couch. She put the smoothie in the fridge and pulled out some stuff to put a salad together for dinner. Barnaby came trotting happily into the kitchen, and then a mussed-up blonde head appeared in Rachel's line of sight, with a small smile on its face. Hey, Quinn greeted, voice laced with sleep. How were rehearsals? Rachel waved her salad tongs around enthusiastically. Hey, they were wonderful. We're so ready to open, Quinn. It's going to be amazing. It sounds like fun, Quinn remarked, leaning into the breakfast bar and shaking her head around to settle her hair. Rachel was amused. So much fun. You'll probably meet my cast sometime. They're just fantastic, she enthused. Oh, I got you a strawberry smoothie. It's in the fridge if you want it. Rachel didn't bother waiting for Quinn to answer. She just swept over to the fridge and pulled it out and handed it to her. Quinn smiled. Thanks. Rachel steadied her and calmed herself down a little. So, tired, huh? Couldn't go back to sleep? Quinn sipped her drink. No. It's going to take some getting used to, she said quietly. Well, you should get an early night. I don't have work tomorrow, so maybe we can do something. Have you seen the city yet? Quinn nodded. Yeah, I've lived here for a while. Rachel waited to see if she would say more. She didn't elaborate. Okay, maybe we could hang out in Central Park, get some lunch or something. I have some friends coming over in the morning, so it would have to be after that. Yeah, okay. Rachel raised her eyebrows. Well, Quinn, try to contain your excitement, please. Quinn flushed. No, really, that sounds fun. I'm just not used to people, hanging out with people. People wanting to hang out with me. Rachel thought for a moment. Well, we'll bring Barnes. He likes to chase, everything, I guess. He's actually goes a little psychotic. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Actually, maybe we shouldn't bring him. Oh, no, he'll behave, Quinn said, smiling down at the dog lying against the dishwasher. Won't you, Bonzi? Rachel scoffed. Psh, of course he'll behave for you. He thinks you're his lord or something. A goddess. Rachel squatted down next to Barnaby and held his hand with both her hands, looking straight into his happy brown eyes. Look, Bee, I know she looks like an angel, and I can see why you're enamored with her. Rachel looked up at a crimson Quinn and gave her a wink. But you're supposed to love me more, okay? Good boy. Rachel stood up and went to sit next to Quinn at the breakfast bar with a salad. He likes to pretend he doesn't understand me, but I know he does. I taught him to dance, Rachel said wisely, stuffing a few mini tomatoes in her mouth. Quinn scrunched up her face in confusion and excitement. He dances? Oh yeah, he's a pro. Just make him get off his lazy ass and say dance. It works best if you have a conga line. Rachel had only taught her dog to dance because she and Mercedes had wanted to see who could get the dog to do the cooler trick. Barnaby learned dance. Mercedes Terrier learned speak and had never shut up since. Quinn narrowed her eyes and studied Rachel, trying to see if she was joking or not. Rachel caught this out of the corner of her eye and smiled, greens poking out of her mouth. Seriously, Quinn, my dog is a dancer. Rachel thought it should be obvious. She had tried teaching him to sing as well, but multiple complaints had been filed by the neighbors. Quinn stood up and walked over to Barnaby, who stood immediately for her. Quinn smirked and Rachel scoffed at the unfairness of it all. Traitor dog, Rachel muttered under her breath. Okay, Barnes, dance. Barnaby did nothing, just sat and watched Quinn contently. Quinn rolled her eyes and sighed, then turned around. I knew. No, try again, really. I'm not making this up, Rachel insisted. Dance, Bonzi. Come on, B, dance. Barnaby jumped up a little bit and lost his balance, then jumped up again and shuffled around on his hind legs, so his lolling tongue came up to Quinn's chest. Quinn grinned and laughed. Oh my god, your dog dances! That is so cool! Rachel chuckled, a little surprised. That was the loudest she had heard Quinn speak. She sounded so excited. She looked so excited. Her mouth was huge. He won't learn anything else. He doesn't even know sit, but he'll dance his fluffy little butt off if you have a treat, Rachel explained. Quinn just kept smiling and crouched down to rub Barnaby's tummy. Did you have lots of pets? You seem really great with animals. Well, dogs, or one dog, Rachel babbled. No, Quinn said quietly, still smiling softly. Rachel nodded and bit her lip, waiting for the woman to elaborate, but no more words came. Okay, well, I'm off to bed. Rachel slid off her stool and nudged Barnaby out of the way to put her bowl in the dishwasher. Good night, Quinn. Night, Rach. Rachel smiled at the name as she made her way to the room. She thought about ways to teach Barnaby to sing. Seriously, Rachel's Barry's dog should be able to sing like those huskies on YouTube. She would find a way to do it without being evicted. A line break. 3 hours later, Rachel was still awake and suffering from deja vu. She heard the creaking in the hallway and didn't hesitate in sliding out of the bed and opening her bedroom door. Quinn was in the hallway again, shuffling around nervously outside her own bedroom door. Is it the pipes again? Rachel asked quietly. Quinn startled a little, but nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. She didn't even bother trying to hide the bear behind her back this time. Rachel pursed her lips and thought for a moment. Come on, she finally said, gesturing for Quinn to come join her. You can sleep in my bed. Rachel just figured things were less scary when there was someone next to you. Quinn looked nervous. Her eyes were still focused on the ground. Barnaby's in my bed, Rachel said, nonchalantly trying to coax Quinn. She didn't want to have to outright beg this woman to get in her bed. That would be a little, desperate. Quinn's eyes flickered to hers for a moment. He would be inordinately pleased if you joined him, Rachel continued, lips quirked up a little. Quinn stepped hesitantly in Rachel's direction, and Rachel smiled. She allowed Quinn to enter her room first, and directed her to the other side of the bed, the one that didn't have the warm spot that Barnaby had stolen. They both slid under the covers, smiling as the dog's tail thumped against the blankets, though his always remained closed. Can I turn off the lights? Rachel asked, not sure if the whole light sleeping under the door would be enough for Quinn. She used to turn it off until one night she went to get a drink of water and stubbed her toe in the dark so that she couldn't dance for 2 days. Horrible night. Yeah, Quinn said softly. Rachel glanced over in the dark and smiled at the bear cuddled up to the woman's chest. What's his name? Rachel whispered, then gestured at the shadow of the stuffed animal when Quinn turned to look at her. It's Pooh Bear, Quinn said in the darkness, embarrassed. Rachel grinned. But it's not a Winnie the Pooh. No, I mean, I wanted one, but I got Pooh Bear instead. Rachel rolled over to face Quinn, who was still on her back with the bear pressed to her chest. I have a lion, Rachel offered, smiling when Quinn turned on her side to face her. His name's Fuzzy. He got, Hey, don't laugh. I was 3, okay? Rachel chuckled and tapped Pooh Bear on the nose. Anyway, he got really worn out. I mean, Seriously, he could not keep up with Rachel Barberberry at all. I actually kept him on my bed until I got B here a year ago. Then B ate one of Fuzzy's legs and Quinn gasped. And Rachel smiled reassuredly, grabbing one of her hands, and now he lives in my closet, safe and sound, happily stitched up and overcoming the odds with 3 legs. Quinn chuckled and buried her nose in the bed. "All right, Quinn," Rachel said with a faux straightness. "Good night, for real this time. No more wandering the house in the middle of the night like some kind of nightmare from Paranormal Activity, okay?" Exactly the kind of movie she wanted to think about before bed. Quinn nodded, and to Rachel's surprise, kissed the small hand that was holding Quinn's. Rachel was glad her blush couldn't be seen in the dark room. Line break. Rachel woke up the next day to an empty bed, her arms wrapped around Pooh Bear? She slid out of the bed and tucked the bear under the covers like he had been in Quinn's room that first day. She then changed into sweats and a t-shirt so that she would be sort of presentable for her friends, and made her way to the kitchen. Quinn was sitting at the breakfast bar in sleep shorts and a long-sleeved tee and a severe case of bedhead, obliviously funneling Lucky Charms into her mouth. "Good morning," Rachel sing-song. She ruffled Quinn's hair as she walked through the kitchen. Quinn choked on a few Lucky Charms and ducked her head shyly. "Morning," she said around her mouthful. Rachel laughed and poured herself some coffee. "Did you sleep well?" Rachel asked. Rachel was surprised. She actually fell asleep as soon as Quinn joined her. It's a nightmare about sleepwalking people who creepily stand by the bed and watch you in your slumber plagued her. But hey, she was asleep at least, and she was burning her copy of Paranormal Activity. Quinn nodded. "I took Barnaby out this morning. I tried to wake you because he was whining, but you looked... I didn't want to disturb you," Quinn finished with a pink tint to her cheeks. Rachel smiled reassuringly right as there was a knock on the front door. She looked to the door and rolled her eyes. "These are my friends. This is the first time in my lifetime they've ever shown up early to anything," she remarked. "You'll like them. Just be yourself," she said more quietly. Quinn kept playing with the marshmallows in her milk. Her legs started bouncing up and down, but she met Rachel's eyes and nodded. "Open the door, bae! I need a fucking Ziploc bag!" Rachel shook her head and laughed to calm Quinn's nervous expression. "Rachel!" A separate voice came muffled through the door. "Open the damn door! I had a Hot Pocket this morning. It was a mistake that's quickly turning into a disaster." "Dear God, Rachel, open the door!" a third voice yelled. Rachel looked slightly horrified as she walked over to the door and swung it open. Quinn focused on eating her marshmallows. Rachel bowed in fake hospitality to her guests, waving them inside. "Come in, ladies, gentlemen. Thank you for being patient and not disrupting the neighbors at all." "I'm hitting your can, Rach," Puck stated, sort of frantically scurrying through the living room, only in the state of mind to glance at Quinn. "Barry, I need a goddamn Ziploc bag right now. Why do... Oh my God, Santana! What is that?" Rachel stared, disgusted and intrigued at the dead animal that Santana held on a stiff piece of paper out of the eye line of Brittany. "It's a frog. I'm taking an anatomy class, and we're supposed to find dead insects to study." Kurt rolled his eyes. "Frogs aren't insects." "She knows. Supposedly. She says bigger is better for studying anatomy. You're lucky we stopped her from scooping an armadillo into a trash bag yesterday." "Speaking of fucking bags," Santana interjected loudly, "I need a damn Ziploc bag right now." "Stay calm, okay?" Rachel held up her hands to placate the woman, waving around the dead amphibian in her living room. She pointed to the frog and then to Santana's face. "Don't drop it." Santana smirked and shrugged. "Whatever." Rachel passed behind Quinn as she entered the kitchen and whispered in her ear, "They're insane." Quinn smiled to herself. "Hey, there's a new person in here," Brittany explained, bounding away from Santana and taking the seat next to Quinn at the breakfast bar. Santana followed and placed the dead frog on the paper on the fucking countertop. "Oh my God! Santana!" Rachel lunged across the surface and tossed a Ziploc bag in Santana's direction. "Put it in there! You're disgusting!" Rachel shook her head in disbelief. "God, these people." And then she noticed Quinn's hyperactive, bouncy legs and nervous eyes, which refused to meet the bright, innocent blue ones directed at her. "Brit? Santana?" Rachel said. "Kurt?" she said slightly louder so the boy on the couch could hear. "This is Quinn Fabray, my wonderful new roommate." Quinn flushed and smiled shyly, keeping her eyes focused on people's lips rather than their eyes. "Oh God, they gave you another person to drive crazy? Shit, Fabray, you don't know what you're in for." "Shut up, Santana," Rachel defended. "You're probably a horrible roommate to Brittany. You just put a dead frog on my kitchen counter." Santana rolled her eyes and dragged Brittany to sit on the love seat with her. "Come on, join us, Quinn Fabray," she said, waving her hand around and gesturing to the empty chairs in the living room. "I need to find out if you can handle Barry's brand of crazy." Quinn glanced at Rachel, who smiled softly at her and leaned forward to whisper so only Quinn could hear. "She's harmless, really, like a chihuahua. You can just ignore her if you don't want to talk to her right now. She'll get distracted by something else." Rachel could see that Quinn was tempted to just go back to her bedroom, so she was surprised when the blonde got up and put her bowl in the dishwasher, then went and sat in one of the armchairs in the living room. She pulled her feet up under her and shook her hair out to untangle it. Rachel smiled and went to sit in the chair next to her when Puck finally emerged from the bathroom, Barnaby hot on his heels. "Oh God, Puck," Kurt said. "I forgot you were even here." Puck nodded sagely. "Dude, hot pockets will do things to you. I really think I need to see a chiropractor or acupuncturist or something." Rachel winced. Puck moved to sit next to Kurt and brightened as he caught sight of Quinn. "Oh, score, Rach. Hardy is a new roommate." "Noah!" Rachel scolded. "Be appropriate." "Rachel," Brittany started. "That's like telling a chocolate cake to be vanilla. It's like way less tasty. And racist." Quinn was distracted enough by that statement to look at Brittany in the eyes. Brittany just smiled at her, and Quinn returned it shakily before averting a gaze. "So, Blondie, where are you from?" Santana asked, staring deeply into Quinn's soul. Rachel thought Santana looked like something. She didn't know whether to intervene or just let this play out. She just leaned more fully on the side of a chair that was closest to Quinn. Maybe she would learn some things about her old new roommate. "I'm from here," Quinn said quietly. "You don't seem very sure of that," Santana remarked. Brittany punched her in the arm. "That must have been wonderful, growing up in New York," Kurt said with bright eyes. "We're all from Ohio, which is really..." He scrunched up his nose, and Santana nodded in agreement. "What do you do?" Puck asked, stretching out and putting his boots up on the coffee table. Rachel fought the urge to serve them off. Boots, frogs, whatever. She liked to think herself as a tolerant person. Gwen bit her lip and started messing with the rubber band around her wrist. I'm not employed or anything right now. I have hobbies, books." Rachel smiled. "She has so many books. It's amazing. Oh, and animals." Gwen. "Barnaby has fallen in love with her." Santana nodded and narrowed her eyes. "I'm sure he has." Rachel studied her suspiciously. "How can you afford to live in the city if you don't have a job?" Santana switched tracks. "Santana!" Rachel exclaimed. "You can't ask people that." Rachel really needed a leash for the girl, or a shock collar, or something. Anything to ward off her inappropriate behavior. She could just zap Santana every time she opened her mouth. Quinn smiled at Rachel. "My aunt pays for it," she told everyone else. Rachel couldn't tell Santana didn't want to stop digging until she got Quinn to tell her the secrets of the universe. Surprisingly, Quinn continued, "I got into Columbia a few years ago, so I'm not, completely unqualified. But I was homeschooled after elementary school, and I didn't think college would be right for me." Quinn ducked her head and stretched her rubber band back and forth rapidly. Kurt was watching her carefully and beat Rachel for a change of subject. "We were just stopping by on the way to my store," he said kindly to Quinn. "I'm an interior designer. Puck's my handyman. Santana, well, I have no idea why she's with us. She likes to pretend she hates us, then lets Britt drag her everywhere we go, so..." "Shut it, Hummel! God, I'm bored already. Ready to go?" Rachel rolled her eyes and stood up to receive the frog from the kitchen. Santana followed her and pulled her behind the wall so nobody could see them. "Rachel, what's with this girl? Is something wrong with her? Or is she just a bitch? Because she seems like a bitch." Rachel was grateful for how caring and considerate her friends were. "What? No, Santana!" Rachel excelled in exasperation. "She's sweet. I think she's just shy, and you're really scary to people who don't know that your favorite pajamas have pink fluffy bunnies on them. And if you say the word bitch one more time, I'll throw you off the balcony. Santana chose to ignore the bulk of that statement. She won't look us in the eye. She seems like a serial killer, like a hot one, but a serial killer. She's shy, Rachel said again, more firmly. She needs to get us to know us better. Great, Santana grinned. Rachel was scared. Because we're taking you guys out to a club tomorrow night, and wear something nicer than that ratty-ass shit you got on now, Barry. Rachel expected nothing less. She shook her head and just walked away. Puck and Brittany were at the door, and she watched Kurt shake Quinn's hand softly and tell her it was nice to meet her. Quinn murmured, you too, with a shy smile, looking at his blue eyes. The door slammed as everyone finally left, and Rachel leaned back on it with her eyes closed. She shook her head at Quinn. God, these people. Quinn gave her a small smile and poured herself some more Lucky Charms. And that's the end of Chapter 2, One Foot in Your Bedroom. Chapter 3, Far from the Madding Crowd. Since it was February, and they were in New York walking through Central Park, Rachel was freezing. Her apartment had deceived her into thinking it was warmer outside than it actually was. Now, she strolled along next to Quinn, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. Fucking Siri was a liar. Quinn glanced down and studied her for a moment, a frown forming on her face. Are you cold? Rachel smiled regretfully and nodded as her teeth clicked together. I know. I should have been prepared. I feel like I'm on an Arctic expedition. Quinn slid her coat off her shoulders and went to drape it over Rachel. Here, put this on. Rachel was surprised, but allowed the taller woman to help her slide her arms through. Won't you be cold? Rachel asked worriedly. Quinn just shook her head with a small smile and went back to playing with the flaps on her mittens. They had gotten lunch at Rachel's favorite cafe and were now walking it off in the park. Rachel looked up when she noticed Quinn's head pop up and a slight bounce appear in his step. The blonde's eyes were bright and innocent and excited, and Rachel followed the line of sight, straight to a balloon man. Rachel smiled. Rachel didn't say anything. She wanted to see if Quinn would stop them. Sure enough, they almost passed the vendor before Quinn slowed, then turned to Rachel and stopped, biting her lip. I want to get a balloon, she blurted, then made a what-the-fuck face, like she didn't know why she said that. Rachel grinned knowingly and pulled her over to the vendor. Me too. Quinn looked surprised and excited. Rachel asked for a purple one. Can I have a blue one and a yellow one, please? And a green one? Quinn asked shyly. Rachel smiled and put a hand on Quinn's shoulder. I think my friend here needs a balloon animal hat as well. Rachel studied her for a moment, then nodded decisively. A lion. Definitely a lion. Rachel hoped this guy knew what he was doing, otherwise he'd come out as a hat of yellow sausages. Quinn really did need that. The vendor grinned at them. Alrighty, what about one for you? Rachel started to shake her head, but Quinn held the hand that had been on her shoulder and interrupted quietly. She needs one too. She glanced down at Rachel. A bear, please. The man nodded happily and made their hats and handed them their colorful balloons. They actually looked like animals, which made Rachel and Quinn look sort of like fools, but whatever. They were fabulous. What now? Rachel asked. Her balloon hat was slightly too big, so it sat crookedly on her head. Quinn focused on tying the string of one of her balloons to her wrist. Rachel tried not to smile. We could, I don't know, lie in the sun for a while. It might warm you up. I'd just rather stay outside than... Perfect, Rachel said brightly. She smiled as Quinn tossed a few dollars in a homeless man's hat, offering him a wave and a small hi. She wondered how this woman got to be so sweet, and why she didn't share enough of it with the world. Line break. Quinn, Rachel proclaimed, striding out of her bedroom when they got home. I still don't have your cell phone number. Quinn was curled in the corner of the couch with one of her books. Rachel watched realization dawn on her face. "I don't have one," Quinn said, somewhat sheepishly, eyes going back to her book. Rachel was not able to process this fact. Her own life would fall to pieces if she didn't have her phone. She'd end up living in a cardboard box by the river, not knowing her name and singing to the ducks. "You don't have a phone?" Rachel was wide-eyed. Quinn was starting to look uncomfortable. She shook her head. Rachel hesitated and schooled her features into something less judgmental. She really was just fascinated. "Why not?" she asked. Quinn shrugged her shoulders slightly. "I don't need one," she said quietly. Rachel studied her for a moment and went and sat on the other end of the couch. "How do you contact people? Talk to friends?" Rachel asked, the shock in her voice replaced with curiosity. Quinn frowned, still with her face in the book. "Who?" she asked. Rachel sighed. "Quinn." Quinn didn't respond. Rachel ducked her head a little lower. "Can you look at me, please?" Quinn bit her lip and dragged her eyes up to meet Rachel's warm brown ones. "Thank you," Rachel smiled. "But what about your aunt? Don't you have to talk to her?" Quinn's eyes flickered away, but returned to Rachel's after a moment. She shrugged again. "If she wanted to talk to me, she could use the landline." "You don't talk to her?" Quinn shook her head slowly. "Not really." Well, that wasn't right, Rachel thought. If Rachel was a sweet girl's aunt, she'd be calling every day to make sure the woman was eating more than sugary cereal and Twinkies for dinner, and wasn't being abducted after playing on the swings in the park. In fact, she'd probably do that as Rachel. So, logical conclusion, get Quinn a phone. Rachel leapt off the couch and strolled over to the kitchen counter, where she grabbed her bag. "Come on, Quinn, we're getting you a phone." Quinn didn't move, just watched with wide eyes from her position on the couch. Rachel quieted her enthusiasm a little bit, and went and sat back down with Quinn's coat and bag in her hands. "I mean, I'm not forcing you, but it would be cool to be able to text you during the day." Quinn looked surprised. She was running her fingers along the edges of the pages. "You text me?" "Of course," Rachel grinned. "You can distract me during my lunch breaks, and I can call you and complain about Santana being a bitch, or coordinate picking up takeout. Plus, I don't think I've ever used a landline in my life. I'm not entirely sure how it works." Quinn smiled and bit her lip. Rachel waited. "Can I put games on it?" Quinn asked, hazel eyes staring right into Rachel's bright ones. "Oh my god, I have to introduce you to my friend Auntie. He can teach you about this game called Angry Birds, and then it will consume your life, and I'll probably never see you again." Rachel was serious. When she'd first gotten Angry Birds, she'd lost a piece of her soul. Being the perfectionist she was, she had used one of her math books to study the slingshot angles. She had even started building a life-sized version of the game in her backyard, a perfectly logical way to gain practical experience to beat this thing, when her dad staged an intervention. Quinn smiled and put down her book. They got home later with a new iPhone, a blue case with an elephant on it, and the latest version of Angry Birds from the App Store. A line break. The next day, after dinner, Rachel was sitting in the living room with Quinn, waiting for her friends to get there to pick them up for the club. Apparently, yesterday was the only day they could ever be early for something, and it was never going to happen again. Sure, they had called and said that Puck had hammered a nail into his thumb and they were delayed at the hospital, but that was not a good enough excuse in Rachel Berry's book. She sighed in exasperation and glanced around. Quinn's knees were bouncing around like a horse in a gallop, and she was focused on picking at the phrase of the belt on her coat. "Quinn," Rachel said quietly. Quinn halted all movements and looked up, eyes fixing on Rachel's lips. Rachel gave her a small smile, and Quinn sat on her hands, ears turning pink. "Finally!" Rachel's cell buzzed with a message that said her friends were down in a cab waiting for them. Well, it actually said, "Get down here, our driver's an ass." So Rachel led Quinn down to the elevator and then outside and into the back of a very crowded cab. It wasn't Rachel's fault that she ended up halfway in Quinn's lap. The blonde was flushing deeply and focusing her eyes out the window. Santana and Puck seemed far too amused by this. They got to the club without any groping incidents, well, intentional groping incidents, and tumbled out of the cab in relief. Quinn had that anxious look on her face again. She wouldn't stop playing with the cuffs of her jacket, and finally Rachel just stilled Quinn's hands with her own and held them as they got to a booth alongside one of the walls in the club. Rachel glanced at Santana and rolled her eyes. The woman was already in an argument with some guy at the bar. They had literally just walked through the door, and she found herself wondering if Santana was drunk. Rachel supposed it was just Santana's personality, the kind of person who came off as perpetually drunk. She and Brittany returned to the table with 6 shots, and Rachel took a deep breath. This was going to be a long night. Quinn's eyes were focused on the shot that was set in front of her. I don't drink, she said quietly. Santana just stared at her. Rachel nodded in realization and nudged the nervous blonde with a shoulder in reassurance. Puck, can you get us something else to drink? Puck seemed conflicted, or constipated. He seemed to be having trouble processing. Rachel waited. He'd grasp everything eventually. After a moment he closed his mouth, nodded silently, and went up to the bar. Santana seemed to have regained the use of her words. Why the fuck don't you drink? She sputtered in disbelief. Rachel leaned away from her. Really, Santana couldn't seem to fathom this non-alcoholic phenomenon. I just don't like it, Quinn replied softly, hunching over the table and playing with her sleeves again. Sorry, she mumbled. Whoa, don't apologize, Quinn, Rachel said, wide-eyed and glaring at Santana. She absently rubbed the blonde's back. Santana ignored her. What do you mean you don't like it? Brittany grabbed Santana's face and turned it around to face her. San, stop, she said slowly. Leave her alone. Santana rolled her eyes but acquiesced. It's just weird, she muttered. Because we're not all alcoholics like you, Kurt remarked. Rachel smiled gratefully at him as Puck returned with a water for Quinn. Thanks, she said in a small voice. No problem, Puck grinned. About half an hour later, when they were suitably intoxicated, Brittany grabbed Santana and dragged her out to the dance floor. Kurt was chatting the bartender up, though Rachel had no idea why. She had never seen a more manly man fix drinks in her life. Puck had vanished about 10 minutes after they'd entered the club, never to be seen again. Rachel was glad Quinn seemed to have relaxed a little. She was actually looking around now and tapping some extra straws against the table like drumsticks. You know, you do that a lot, Rachel remarked observantly. Quinn slowed down her tapping and glanced at Rachel, but didn't say anything. It's like you can't sit still, Rachel continued, hyperactive. Rachel tried to step carefully, really. It was just the alcohol playing it a little fast and loose with words like hyperactive. Quinn nodded and stopped tapping altogether. She held her hands like she didn't know what to do with them. Rachel watched her. It's not bad, she said. It's cute. Quinn flushed. It's like a tic, sort of, like a nervous habit. My aunt, she used to hate it. She gave me medicine for it. Rachel furrowed her brow. What? To stop it? Yeah, I don't know. Dull everything down, Quinn trailed off quietly. Rachel thought this over, and then picked up the straws Quinn had dropped and tapped out her own bead on the table. She smiled at Quinn. I don't like dull. Your way is much better. Quinn bit her lip to contain her smile and grabbed more straws from the pile. When Kurt returned, unsurprisingly unsuccessful in his quest to convert a heterosexual man, they were having a drum war. Well, Quinn was having a drum war. Rachel was making a fool of herself after knocking over her drink when she tried to use it as a hi-hat. She didn't mind. She found Quinn's shy laughter sort of heartwarming and wanted to do it again to keep the sound going. Do you guys know where Britt and Santana went? Kurt asked, shielding his drink from the wrath of Rachel's straws. Rachel shook her head and stopped playing. They're probably having sex in the bathroom. She felt Quinn gasp next to her and turned to look at the blonde. They would do that here? She asked incredulously, uncharacteristically loud. Rachel laughed and raised her eyebrows. Yeah, when's the last time you went to a club? Quinn flushed and ducked her head. Rachel chastised herself. Rachel Barbara Berry, think before you speak. Don't blurt. And stop knocking people's fucking drinks over. You look like a slob. Rachel tapped Quinn's cheek with one of her straws. Sorry, I didn't. I've never been to a club before, Quinn said before Rachel could word vomit some more. She was glad Kurt had turned his back and was pretending this whole exchange wasn't occurring. Oh, Rachel wondered what the opposite of word vomit was. Quinn glanced over and met brown eyes and gave Rachel a small, bashful smile, which Rachel could return. She didn't bother searching for her vocabulary. Brittany and Santana slid back into the booth a minute later, definitely looking like they either just stepped out of a wind tunnel or ravished each other in the bathroom. Hey, Blondie, Santana called from the end of the table. You find anyone you can take home? I mean, we know Rachel here's a fucking hermit. Rachel rolled her eyes. But I'm sure we can find a pretty boy for you. Well, whatever you do, don't go for the bartender. He fails to appreciate any good qualities that a person may have, Kurt remarked bitterly. I'm actually gay, Quinn murmured, eyes on her drink, blowing bubbles into the water. Rachel knocked her fucking drink all over the place again. Holy mother of contain yourself, Rachel. Control yourself. Kurt screeched like it was lava approaching the edge near his lap. Jesus, man, calm down, Santana said, grinning maniacally, eyes fixed on Rachel's face. Quinn was still blowing bubbles through a straw, slightly faster, more panicky bubbles. You gay, Fabre? Santana asked loudly. Obviously, she needed the whole club to hear, just to be sure. Quinn looked in her direction warily. Yes. Santana looked like it was Christmas morning, or she was planning something that could only end in disaster. Rachel felt the urge to put her body between Quinn's and Santana's to protect the woman next to her. Did you know you're on the same team as Bay? Santana looked like the fucking cat that ate the canary. Rachel was bright red and Quinn wasn't faring much better. Kurt was ignoring everybody and everything, trying to get Rachel's drink out of his pants. Quinn obviously had no idea what to say. No? Rachel covered her eyes with her hands to collect herself and block out Santana's goddamn face. She turned to speak to Quinn quietly, hoping for her eyes were calm, but knowing they probably looked like something else. Thank you for telling us, Quinn, she said simply, after ducking her head to catch hazel eyes. Quinn nodded hesitantly. Thank you for telling me, Santana, I guess. Quinn scrunched up her face. Rachel figured she hadn't meant to thank Santana. Most people don't. It's usually an unavoidable accident. It's okay. I would have told you anyway. Santana just likes to stick her pokey little hands in everybody else's business because she knows we're cooler than her, Rachel said, lips quirked. She expected to hear us shut the fuck up come down the table, was pleasantly surprised when it never happened. Then she almost vomited when she looked at Santana and found her latched into Brittany's face. It's so cute though, honestly. Like, aside. I get it. To continue. Kurt was stuck in a permanent face palm. Or maybe he was mourning the loss of his favorite pants to Rachel's drinks and drumming mishap. Whatever. Rachel felt much lighter now. Happier. Like anything could happen. End of Chapter 3. Far from the madding crowd. Chapter 4. Something make my chest stir. A few days later, Rachel came home from rehearsals fully expecting Quinn to be in the apartment. Quinn didn't really go anywhere, unless it was to walk Barnaby or to pick up takeout, and Rachel sort of liked having somebody to come home to. She really liked the fact that she was actually sleeping well at night, because Quinn had been joining her, quietly and bashfully, with Pooh Bear at her side. Rachel figured it was a solution that benefited them both, so it was the logical, practical thing to do. When she walked through the door, her eyes landed on Quinn sitting at the breakfast bar, stuffing what looked like freshly made peanut butter cookies in her mouth. Quinn glanced at Rachel's direction. Now she frequently maintained eye contact, which Rachel enjoyed, because really, who wouldn't? She ruffled the blonde's choppy hair as she walked by, and Quinn ducked her head as she always did, trying to swallow her mouth full of cookie. She looked excited, and Rachel waited expectantly with a smile on her face. Rachel. Rachel laughed. Yes, Quinn. Quinn seemed like she couldn't contain her smile. I made you vegan celebratory peanut butter cookies. Rachel raised her eyes in surprise. The greatest lengths she had seen Quinn go to for food preparation involved pouring milk on Fruit Loops. Rachel looked down at the plate. There were only 4 cookies left. So you ate, what, like 12 before I got home? Quinn flushed but kept smiling. Well, you were taking forever, she defended, shoving the plate in front of Rachel. And I'm just such an amazing baker, I couldn't resist. Did Quinn just make a joke? Did she just brag? Oh, good. Rachel was rubbing off on her. Rachel scrunched up her nose and took a bite of one of the cookies. Holy Mother of God, it tasted like an angel. Quinn grinned at Rachel's expression. Rachel just tried to make her face look less orgasmic. Did you say these were celebratory cookies? She asked. Quinn nodded, her smile now open-mouthed and in full force. Rachel studied her for a moment with a grin of her own. She knew Quinn was waiting for her to ask, but she waited. She turned around, acting like she was going back to her room, and Quinn made an unintelligible noise of protest. Rachel swung back around, an innocent expression on her face. Quinn was biting her lip, and Rachel couldn't take it anymore. What are we celebrating, Quinn Fabre? Rachel set the plate of cookies down. She tended to go a little overboard with celebrations and didn't want them to end up as Barnaby's dinner on the floor. I got a job. Rachel's face brightened even more. You got a job? Quinn laughed and nodded. At that dog rescue a few blocks away. I get to feed them and walk them, and Quinn was cut off as Rachel threw her arms around her. She stiffened a little at first, but Rachel would not let anybody reject a Rachel Barberberry hug. Quinn smelled like gummy bears. That's so great, she said into Quinn's neck, then frowned and pulled away. Quinn! Quinn's smile faded a little bit, but she didn't get the chance to answer. You go out and get a job, and I'm all proud and happy for you, and you leave me 4 cookies to celebrate with? This is not acceptable. Rachel put her hands on her hips. She was not fucking kidding around here. Quinn watched her, a little amused, a little scared. We could make more, she suggested quietly. Rachel stared at her for a second, before jumping up and down and clapping her hands. Yes, that'll be even more fun. You can show me how you make them. God! Rachel stopped jumping and took a breath. She felt like her eyes were tearing up. Her body was just too dramatic for its own good. I'm so proud of you. Sure, she'd known Quinn for like a week, but it was just impossible not to love the sweet girl. She knew Quinn had problems with people, and the fact that she went out and got a job where she worked with puppies all fucking day? God, Rachel just could not contain herself. What? No, Rachel, don't cry. Quinn looked distraught now. Rachel waved her hands around vaguely. She wanted to say, no, I'm fine, just so happy. So she hoped her improvised sign language got the message across. Quinn stood and lifted her arms like she was going to hug Rachel again, but seemed to decide against it, and looked down at the ground instead. Rachel laughed through her tears and wrapped her arms around Quinn. Quinn held her for a minute, until Rachel pulled back with a massive grin on her shiny face. God, pull yourself together, woman. Quinn said with a small smile. Rachel just laughed and moved into the kitchen with her plate of cookies. 3 hours later, they were laid out on the couch, plates of chocolate chip and peanut butter cookies balanced on the bodies and on the coffee table. Rachel couldn't blame Quinn for eating all the celebratory cookies earlier, seeing as she was on her 14th chocolate chip cookie at the moment. The kitchen was in disarray behind them. Barnaby had been turned white after a flower fight, but Quinn's hands were sitting still on her lap, and there was a small, content smile on her face. Right now, that's all that mattered to Rachel. A line break. Wake me up before you go, 'cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go, take me dancing tonight. I wanna hit that high. Rachel jitterbugged around the kitchen, singing into her spatula and trying to drag out that high as long as possible. She spied Quinn walking or stumbling in a blind, sleepy haze out of Rachel's bedroom and waved her over with a hand. Quinn blinked at her for a minute before stalking over to the breakfast bar and laying her head down on her arms. Rachel stopped singing and reached over to ruffle the blonde hair. "You okay?" Quinn lifted her head up and nodded, flushing a little. "Did you send Barnaby to wake me up, or does he just, do that?" Rachel turned her back to Quinn, unable to hide a guilty smile. She hadn't said to Barnaby, "Go wake Quinn up." The dog wasn't that smart. So she had just pointed to the bedroom door and jumped up and down a little excitedly, saying his name over and over. Apparently, he got the message, as Quinn was now awake. "Breakfast, Quinn?" Quinn was probably too sleepy to notice that Rachel had completely ignored her question. I'll just have leftover pizza." Rachel turned around to glare at her. Quinn faltered. "And Lucky Charms?" "Quinn Fabray! You cannot start out your day with that disgusting food. Here, I'll add to my vegan scramble. Do you like onions?" Quinn scrunched up her nose and Rachel rolled her eyes. "Use your words, Quinn," Rachel said, only half joking. Hazel eyes met Rachel's, even as Quinn's hands set to work playing with the keys on the counter. "No, I don't like onions or peppers, and I'm allergic to walnuts. Not that you put those in a scramble, but for future reference." Rachel smiled at Quinn, pleased with that response. She turned back to the counter and listened as the jangling of the keys stopped. She looked over her shoulder and winked at Quinn, whose ears turned crimson, and when she resumed her singing of Wham's "Wake Me Up Before You Go." Unfortunately, Rachel got halfway through the second line before her voice cracked on the brain. She froze and shut her mouth at once. Immediately she turned around and looked at Quinn, who watched her intently. She obviously did not know the severity of the situation. Seriously, her voice cracked. Rachel spoke in a whisper, so as to not damage it any further than the utterly disastrous state it was in now. "It'll be okay. It's just a little tickle. I don't need to see a doctor. Opening night's still 2 weeks away, and I'm not even getting sick. I'll just take it easy at rehearsals today and tomorrow, and everything will be fine." Quinn looked a little nervous now, watching Rachel carefully. She nodded quietly along. Rachel spun back around when she heard the scramble sizzling, took it off the burner, and split it into 2 plates. She put one in front of Quinn. "Thank you," Quinn said softly. Rachel didn't even try to whisper this time. She mouthed the words, "You're welcome," and then dug into her own breakfast as Quinn watched. Rachel's dads and friends and roommates had always told her she went a little psychotic when she got sick, so Rachel figured the best thing to do right now was ignore any possible problems. Positive thinking was the way to go. When it came time to leave for rehearsals, Rachel gathered her stuff together and stood next to Quinn, glancing around the apartment for anything she might have forgotten. She turned to say, or mouth, goodbye to Quinn, and when the blonde surprised her with a hug, Rachel was caught off balance, and Quinn was too, by the impulsive gesture, and Rachel had only just wrapped her arms around the woman when Quinn pulled away. She was bright red and her eyes were darting around the room. She looked like she couldn't believe she did that. "Have a good rehearsal," Quinn murmured. Rachel smiled warmly at her. "Have a good day at work," she whispered. "I'll text you later." Quinn nodded and sat back down, playing with her keys again. Rachel watched her, and then grabbed her lemon and honey tea and swept out the door. "Positive thinking, Rachel. You will not get sick." A line break. Of course, the next day Rachel got sent home from the rehearsals early by her director. It's not like she didn't expect it. When it felt like her lungs were drowning and she had poured acid down her throat, for the first time since Quinn started joining her, she couldn't get to sleep last night. This is why she left an hour early for work, before Quinn was even awake, hoping the fresh air might help. Unfortunately, fucking Siri lied to her again, and she only ended up freezing her ass off. So she now sat helplessly on the kitchen floor. She had abandoned the couch after repeatedly getting up for tissues and water. Now Rachel was just too tired to move. The floor felt nice, cool in her legs. She heard the front door open and close. Quinn would probably be surprised to find her home so early. So she let out a little whine to let the woman know she was present. Quinn appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later. She looked amused, and then concerned when she realized the state Rachel was in. Rachel just looked up at her through bleary eyes, pouting miserably. They sent me home, she muttered thickly, tilting her head back so it leaned against the dishwasher. Barnaby sat next to her. He actually looked a little sympathetic. Rachel would have been pleased that he was being so good, if she wasn't convinced she was dying. Quinn looked like she had no idea what to do, but her hazel eyes looked very worried. She tapped her fingers on her pants a few times before stepping forward hesitantly and kneeling down in front of Rachel. Why are you sitting on the floor? In the kitchen. I don't know, Rachel whined out pitifully. Quinn winced. Quinn thought for a moment and then shifted closer. Let's get you, can I put you on the couch? Rachel nodded, and Quinn helped her up carefully. Apparently, she dislodged the fluid she had been keeping still, like a swamp in her lungs, and Rachel dissolved into a coughing fit. Quinn just rubbed her back cautiously until it stopped, and supported Rachel enough to get to the couch. Rachel watched as Quinn straightened and bit her lip. Her eyes darted around the apartment. She was tapping her pants again. You're okay, Quinn, Rachel hissed out. She watched the fingers stop moving, but was too tired and uncomfortable to be confused when Quinn spun on a heel and walked away. Rachel sighed, or tried to. She ended up making a gobbling noise and then wiping her arm across her red nose. Suddenly, a blanket billowed up around her. She registered that it was fleecy and warm, and it had green giraffes on it, and she smiled briefly. A minute later, Quinn set a mug of something steaming on the coffee table, along with a box of tissues and a coloring book with crayons. Rachel tried to raise her eyebrow, and Quinn noticed and flushed. I like to color when I'm sick, she said simply before scurrying away again. Rachel chuckled, and then realized it was the most painful thing she had ever experienced, and stopped abruptly. Quinn returned again and sat on the coffee table in front of Rachel. She held up a movie that wasn't Rachel's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and gave her a small smile. You've probably seen it, but it's about an awesome flying car and this really cool adventure, and there's a big fluffy dog in it, and Dick Van Dyke. Rachel gave the best smile she could muster. Of course she had seen it. She was Rachel Bay, and it was a musical. It was for the same reason she nodded enthusiastically when Quinn gestured to the DVD player. When Quinn held up her bear, bashfully biting her bottom lip, her ears turning pink, Rachel held out her arms weakly, pouting up at the other woman. Pooh Bear, she whined roughly. Quinn smiled and let Rachel have her bear. Rachel hugged him close to her chest and snuggled under the blankets. She closed her eyes when Quinn hesitantly reached out a hand and brushed dark hair off her forehead. The last time someone had taken care of her when she was sick was a few years ago, and it was Noah. And it wasn't really taken care of as much as came over to raid her fridge and make sure she hadn't died. Quinn settled at the opposite end of the couch, and Rachel automatically settled her feet on the other woman's lap. She wiggled them in protest as Quinn started drumming along them with her fingers. Barnaby lay down in front of the couch. Rachel would have expected him to be up in Quinn's lap, but apparently he decided to be loyal today, for once. About 10 minutes in, Rachel fell asleep, face buried in Quinn's bed. She woke up a few hours later to find that, oh my god, it was so fucking hot in there. She whined absently and threw the blanket on the floor. Quinn, who Rachel realized was still present, didn't say anything, just picked up the blanket and folded it onto the coffee table. "You managed to get some sleep," Quinn offered quietly. "I don't need sleep. I need my voice," she mumbled. God, she had turned into an irrational child. "Turn the TV off," she moaned. Rachel could hear the chitty chitty bang bang song in the background, and if that wasn't something that got into your head and drove you to the brink of insanity, well, nothing would. Quinn complied. Rachel's eyes were closed so she couldn't see Quinn, but the music stopped. "Do you want to go to bed?" she heard a small voice ask, and she nodded dully in reply but made no move to stand. Is it okay if I carry you?" Again, Rachel nodded. She clutched Pooh Bear tighter as she felt arms under her knees and her back, and then turned into the gummy bear-scented warmth that was Quinn. Quinn settled her down in bed with medicine and cough drops and tissues, and then hovered unsurely near the doorway. Good night, Rachel," she said quietly. Rachel furrowed her brow, face pressed into her pillow. She really had no idea what was going on in her delirious state, and oh my god, she was freezing. "Where are you going?" She reached an arm out and flailed it around a little before dropping it in exhaustion. "You sleep here," Rachel mumbled. It was completely silent for a minute, and then Rachel heard some rustling about before the lights went out and the other side of the bed dipped. She could hear Quinn fidgeting around with her hands, little tapping sounds, nails clicking. "Quinn," Rachel breathed out and rolled over. Dear God, she was so cold. She wanted that giraffe blanket back. It made her feel so happy. Instead, Rachel deliriously curled herself up into Quinn's front, clutching the t-shirt and hoping for warmth. She felt Quinn stiffen, and it took at least 5 minutes of just lying there, but finally Quinn's arms circled around Rachel and she was warm again. Quinn pulled her a little closer, and Rachel was able to drop off, aware that her breathing sounded like a drowning bulldozer, but not caring, because Quinn smelled sweet like gummy worms. Rachel woke up the next morning, well, early afternoon, in an empty bed. She determined this by waving her arm around and waiting for it to collide with something. It did not, but a noise from the doorway caught her attention. Rachel lifted her head up and saw a figure in the doorway. Her eyes were so blurry it could be a fucking sea monster for all she knew. But the sea monster spoke. "I made you a fruit bowl," Quinn said softly before lifting up her chin and stepping forward. "You need to eat it. Now, please." Rachel sat up and rubbed her eyes and registered that, though her nose was still running, her sore throat was gone. She focused on Quinn, who stood next to the bed, bowl held in an outstretched hand, mouth slightly open and waiting for a reaction. Rachel slowly smiled and took the fruit. "Thank you, Quinn." Quinn sighed in relief. "Do you feel better?" Hazel eyes searched her face, and Quinn reached a hand out, only stiltedly halting once in midair to sort of tame Rachel's bedhead. "I do, still a little runny." Rachel glanced up as Quinn took her hand away. "What did you have for breakfast?" Quinn's eyes dropped to the ground. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "I made you some sugar cookies to cheer you up, so I had." "You had 12 cookies for breakfast," Rachel stated plainly, trying to hide her smile with a massive piece of melon. "No," Quinn proclaimed, bright eyes meeting Rachel's. "I saved them for you. I had the leftover dough." She trailed off at the end with a frown. "Oh my god, Quinn, you can't have a pile of cookie dough for breakfast. That's ridiculous." "I like it," Quinn said with a small smile. "It's better than the cookies themselves." Rachel rolled her eyes. "It'll make you sick. Then I'll be the one giving you my three-legged fuzzy to sleep with, and you'll turn into Barnaby's favorite again. And I don't deal with vomit well. I start a chain reaction." Quinn looked suitably chastised as she rocked back and forth on her heels, snapping the rubber band on her wrist. Rachel beckoned her closer with a warm smile. "Now, help me finish this fruit, 'cause you put like 9 melons in here, and I can't eat it by myself." Rachel could eat melon by herself all day. End of Chapter 4. Something make my chest stir. Chapter 5. My Bears. By the time opening night rolled around, Rachel was back in top form, only slightly crazier than usual because, well, dear God, it was opening night. She paced around her dressing room waiting for her friends to meet her, sure that she was suffering some sort of health problem, cardiac arrest, suffocation, sudden onset epilepsy. Rachel swirled around when the door opened, watching as Kurt froze and stared at her. God, she must look like a maniac. Keep moving, Hummel, a voice behind him said. It's hot as ass in this hallway. Kurt rolled his eyes but stepped into the room. Wow, that's wonderful, Santana. Brittany and Santana followed him into the room, and Rachel stopped facing long enough to greet them with a nervous smile. So, have you forgotten your lines yet? Santana asked. She looked bored and started rummaging through all the crap on Rachel's dresser. Oh my god, Santana, Kurt exclaimed. You don't ask her that right before a show. Well, hopefully the answer's no, Santana said distractedly, pocketing one of Rachel's nail polishes and opening her drawers. I am fully prepared for this. Thank you very much, Santana. I've been preparing for 24 years, actually, and it's perfectly healthy to be filled with nervous energy before a show. Rachel chose not to mention how she had been diagnosing herself with far-fetched medical disorders a few minutes ago. Santana studied her with something like pride in her eyes. Heavily disguised and hidden pride, or alcohol intoxication, then went back to stealing her stuff. Kurt took one of Rachel's hands in his. You're a bagel on a plate full of onion rolls, Rachel. You were born for this, and we're proud of you, and you'll be amazing. Oh, and I'm illegally filming it on Puck's crappy camera because Mercedes is threatening me with, physical violence. Rachel pulled him into a hug. Thanks, Kurt. She let go as the door opened again and Quinn walked in hesitantly with her hands in her coat pockets. She smiled when she saw Rachel. Rachel started to walk over to her. Hey, it's Quinn, Brittany exclaimed, beating Rachel and bounding to a halt in front of Quinn. She didn't try to touch her, just stood there with a bright smile on her face and warm blue eyes. Hi, Brittany, Quinn said, lips quirked up slightly. How are you? Brittany asked. Rachel almost laughed. She had never heard Brittany ask that before in her life. They were the sort of boring pleasantries Brittany usually just bounded right over. Rachel glanced at Kurt, who looked a little unnerved. Santana, pockets now weighed down with Rachel's belongings, just studied the two blondes with a smile. Rachel could see Quinn's fingers moving in her pockets. I'm fine. How about you? I'm great. But I have to go now, because San said we could get churros if I could eat mine before the show starts. So, bye, Quinn. Bye, Rachel. Brittany grabbed Santana's hand and skipped out the door. Kurt plopped down on the couch and Rachel made her way over to Quinn, who pulled her into a hug as soon as she was close enough. Thanks for coming, she said, when they pulled apart. Quinn smiled. Of course. I would have been here earlier, but Barnaby, chewed the shoes I wanted to wear, so I had to change my dress. Well, you look wonderful, Rachel said, grinning as Quinn flushed and looked down at her feet. Will you be okay here? I mean, are you comfortable in the audience? She asked, slightly quieter. Kurt wasn't paying attention. He was messing around with a video camera that looked like it hadn't been used since 1992. Quinn's ears turned pink to match her face. She nodded shyly. I'll be fine. You'll be amazing, Rach, and I'll just focus on your voice. Rachel searched her face for a moment for any signs that Quinn wasn't fine. She grinned when Hazel's eyes met hers and turned to Kurt, clapping her hands. Okay, I have 20 minutes, guys. Kurt, if you escort Milady out to your seats, I'll see you all after the show. Dinner, right? Kurt nodded as he stood up. Go be a star, Rachel, he said, offering Quinn his arm with a warm smile. Quinn took it and gave Rachel a small wave before the two left the dressing room. Rachel resumed her pacing and counted down the minutes to showtime. A line break. The show went flawlessly, with the only disruption coming from a drunk woman in the audience who seemed to be under the impression that she was watching The Little Mermaid. Rachel was proud of herself, and her cast, of course. She was legitimately worried that there was too much adrenaline coursing through her as they bowed at the curtain call, and she'd pass out into the orchestra. At the moment, she found her friends in the audience clapping wildly, Puck was wolf whistling. Santana was trying to make it seem like she wasn't bawling her eyes out. Quinn just looked so proud. Quinn still looked proud as they settled into a booth at some fancy restaurant that Kurt was paying for, whose name nobody could pronounce. Rachel didn't care. She'd eat freaking rose petals if they were put on a plate right now. It was a crowded restaurant, and it only got louder as it filled with more people. Barry, you have a fucking price tag on your dress. Santana stated calmly while perusing her menu. Puck snorted while he caught sight of it. Oh my god, Rachel whined, looking over her shoulder and carefully pulling the tag off. Carefully. Because she pulled the tag off once and had to walk home with semi-pornographic gaping hole in the back of her dress. You guys should have told me sooner. Santana scoffed. You're lucky I told you now, she muttered. Rachel sighed. She really couldn't understand half the menu. She'd probably end up with 4 bites of food surrounded by 9 pounds of decoration. What are you guys getting? Rachel asked the table at large. Cordon bleu, Kurt replied instantly, filled with ham and paprika. Puck glanced at him and nodded his head. Yep, I'm gonna go with that too. Pork steak with walnuts and brie gratin, Santana said. I think. Unless this means something like fried pig hooves or something. Rachel said, trying to ignore that image. What about you, Quinn? Quinn glanced up from her menu. I'm getting grilled cheese. Seriously, Blondie? We're in this restaurant built for the fucking kings, and you go for a grilled cheese? Santana remarked incredulously. Rachel had to admit, grilled cheese sounded better than the fried pig hooves Santana had probably accidentally ordered. Quinn frowned and focused her eyes back on the menu. I don't really like any of this, she said quietly. I can change it. No, Rachel interrupted, taking Quinn's menu and folding it in half. You get what you want, Quinn. We're all probably wishing we'd ordered that as well. Quinn nodded with her eyes still fixed to the table. Rachel ordered tortellini with spinach ricotta, and when the food came, everybody was pleased to find they had interpreted the menu correctly. The sauce on Brittany and Santana's food almost made Brittany vomit, but whatever. She scraped most of it off, and it was fine. It wasn't pig hooves. Quinn started playing with the silverware about halfway through the meal, flipping the spoon up and down with her fingers and bouncing her knees. It was getting very loud in the restaurant. Quinn, Rachel said quietly, putting her hand over the spoon so Quinn couldn't reach it. Quinn froze and kept chewing a sandwich, always focused on Rachel's hand. Quinn, you're okay. Rachel took Quinn's free hand to prevent it from playing with the cutlery anymore. She smiled softly when Quinn met her eyes, and winked as she stuck the spoon next to Kurt and out of Quinn's reach, said Quinn. Puck started loudly, watching the two with a smirk. Rachel was pretty hot on that stage tonight, huh? Kurt choked on his food, and Brittany thumped him on the back. Quinn flushed immediately, but smiled and looked at Rachel. She was amazing. Puck nodded like he was expecting her to continue to act out some sort of fantasy. Rachel was watching him suspiciously. Surprisingly, Quinn did continue. I don't think I've ever heard a voice like yours, Rachel. It's like, it makes me feel happy inside. Now it was Rachel's turn to blush. Puck was still grinning like a fucking fool. I know you went to Tisch, but you sang in high school too, right? Rachel was still trying to return her face to its normal color, so Brittany answered for her. Hell yeah, she did. She was the captain of our glee club. We won national senior year, which I think was because of my dancing, but I guess Rach did a good job singing too. Santana nodded along sagely. Oh god, Brittany, you're giving me high school flashbacks. Kurt rubbed his temples. You still talk to Finn, right, Rachel? Rachel nodded. Puck caught the confusion on Quinn's face. Kurt's stepbrother, my best friend, her ex, he explained succinctly. Quinn frowned. I am grateful for everything that happened in high school. I overcame those obstacles and am now starring in a Funny Girl revival on Broadway. Rachel emphasized her point by waving her arms around randomly. She was a little high on excitement. I left the bullies behind and I am exactly where I want to be. She smiled at Quinn and punctuated her sentence by forcibly setting her napkin down on the table. "You were bullied?" Quinn asked. She looked distraught. Rachel bit her lip and glanced at Santana. Before Glee, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I was sort of an easy target, you know. But people came to their senses, realized I would be a massive star someday, and that they would be lucky if they got to wash my dog. I enjoyed the last couple years of high school. Oh yeah, and Barnaby needs a bath. Rachel nudged Quinn on the shoulder reassuringly, though the blonde still looked a little sad. "Can I buy you an ice cream?" Quinn asked. Rachel faltered. That was random. Then she beamed because, you could say no to ice cream. Quinn brightened when Rachel nodded and finished her grilled cheese happily. After dinner, Rachel stood off to the side of the ice cream cart with Santana while everybody else bought their cones. Santana was jingling around Rachel's stolen nail polishes in her coat pockets, humming nonchalantly. "So, you know that girl likes you, right?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'd hope so, seeing as she's my roommate." Santana laughed. "No, no, baby. That girl looks at you like you're a fucking goddess, when she's not cowering away like a weirdo." "Hey!" Rachel glared and shoved Santana off the curb. Santana held up her hands in defense. For a split second, Rachel considered pushing her in the way of a guy on his bike, who looked like he was about to plow through the crowd anyway. "Jeez." Santana regained her balance. "I'm joking. Simmer down," Rachel figured Santana would say something like, "is nice," or "is pretty. Looks like she tastes like cotton candy." Okay, the guy on the bike was almost here. Rachel got ready to shove Santana into his path. No, like, sweet, like you said, too nice. Sugary. Santana backed away from Rachel as she explained herself. "How can you be too nice?" Rachel muttered. Santana just smirked, now safely a few yards away from the bike lane. "She's perfect for you, bae. Just make sure you tell me when you finally find out how she really tastes, okay?" Rachel flushed and tripped on the curb as Santana skipped away to get her massive gumball-topped ice cream for Brittany. Quinn came up and handed Rachel a strawberry cone with a small smile. Rachel couldn't remember the last time anyone had bought her ice cream. She took Quinn's free hand to prevent it from picking the hem of his sleeve and joined the rest of her friends for the walk home. The next weekend, Sunday morning, found Rachel rolling around on a giant hollow ball in the living room. She had told herself she would do some yoga, but found that it was more fun to bounce around like a 4-year-old. She was trying to balance on the ball on her hands and knees like a seal. When Quinn emerged from the bedroom they basically shared. She snorted as soon as she caught sight of Rachel and covered her nose abruptly. Rachel was startled, lost her balance, rolled off the ball, and sent her foot into the wall with so much force she was surprised it didn't make a hole. She lay on the floor with a sort of shocked smile, listening to Quinn laughing from the kitchen. Finally, Quinn emerged with a cup of dry sugar puffs and a glass of chocolate milk. She sat down on the ball next to Rachel. "Are you okay?" Rachel narrowed her eyes, but smiled. It hadn't taken her too long to regather her wits. Quinn didn't look like she was overtly concerned, seeing she was trying to contain a grin. Rachel nodded and rubbed her foot. "Because you almost demolished our wall." Rachel scoffed. "I didn't almost demolish our wall, Quinn. I tapped it, a little roughly, with the force of a wrecking ball." Rachel sat up and looked at Quinn with an exaggerated, annoyed face. She watched Quinn fill her cheeks with sugar puffs like a hamster. "You're chatty this morning." Quinn smiled shyly and shrugged, eyes darting around the room. She gestured to the second ball that Rachel had been planning on using along with the first one to roll herself around the living room like a medieval machine. Really, when she had woken up in the back of her mind, she knew that no yoga would actually be done today. "Can I try?" Quinn asked. "By all means." Rachel waved her arms around. "Don't hurt yourself. And don't put a hole in the wall. And don't... Geez, speak for yourself. I'm not as clumsy as you," Quinn said distractedly, draping her front over the ball and rolling around a little. She was still funneling cereal into her mouth, now at such a ridiculous angle that Rachel believed it deserved an award. Rachel raised her eyebrows and laughed shortly. She liked this, Quinn. Open, Quinn. Okay, you're the one who tripped over Barnaby yesterday and nearly destroyed our coffee table in the process. Quinn ignored her and called Barnaby over to them instead. He bounded across the living room happily, snuffling around Quinn's face until she gave him a sugar puff. Rachel scrunched up her nose. Oh, and last week you snuck out of bed in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, stubbed your toe on the tub, and pulled my whole shower curtain down. Quinn, there were a few seconds where I truly believed you were being murdered. Rachel was being completely serious. She had flashbacks to Psycho all night long. Quinn was one of the clumsiest people she had ever met. Okay, I'm clumsy. Quinn was on her back on the ball now, trying to balance with none of her limbs touching the floor. Rachel knew this was an awesome idea, and there she goes, Rachel thought. Quinn slid backwards off the ball, flung her sugar puffs all over the room, and slammed her head into the wall with a loud thump. Rachel gasped, but then Quinn started laughing, and Rachel's worry changed to amusement. Hopefully no neurological trauma had been suffered. If it had, well, was probably worth it. Then Rachel found she couldn't contain herself. Quinn's laugh was loud and free and melodic, and the blonde was sort of clutching her head, which, okay, maybe she should check that out, but it was just Quinn being Quinn, and Rachel loved it. She laughed along until Barnaby started eating the cereal scattered around the room, and Rachel had to intervene before he made himself sick and vomited in her shoes. Quinn. She tried to sound scolding, but just came off as breathless from laughing too much. Pick up your damn cereal. Stop teaching my dog your terrible eating habits. Quinn sat up and looked around, face bright red. Her smile faded at the sight of the mess. Oh, no, sorry. Rachel watched her start to move around and pick up the cereal bit by bit. Talk about fucking tedious. Rachel grimaced as Quinn put a handful of the floor-tainted cereal back in the box, the cereal that had been on the floor, for longer than 10 seconds, and then clutched in Quinn's hands, back into the damn box. The box with a bear and a blue hat on it. Why do you like bears, Quinn? Rachel asked absently, gathering up the sugar puffs closest to her. Quinn wiped her hands in her sleep shorts and disappeared behind the couch. I don't know. Quinn's disembodied voice said hesitantly. They look fluffy, like you could cuddle them or something. Rachel smiled. She tried not to picture Quinn being mauled by a grizzly bear trying to give it a hug. You're like a bear, Quinn, she remarked. Rachel was too lazy to get up right now, so she just discreetly fed her small handful of sugar puffs to Barnaby, keeping her eyes on the couch the whole time. Quinn's head popped up a moment later, folded by her body. Her nose was scrunched in confusion. Rachel decided to elaborate. Apparently, telling somebody they were like a bear wasn't totally clear-cut in its meaning. You're quiet and clumsy. Obviously. Rachel stared pointedly at Quinn as the blonde sat on the floor on the other side of the coffee table. Quinn flushed. I mean, bears aren't clumsy, but they could knock you out with a paw or something, right? Rachel had no idea. She wasn't a fucking zoologist, man. Plus, you're fluffy, solitary, bear things. Quinn just stared at her. I'm fluffy? Rachel chuckled, rolling her back against the giant ball behind her. Yes. Quinn smiled and drifted off into thought for a moment. Rachel watched with interest. Well then, you're a bear too, Quinn finally said. God, what had Rachel started? No, what had the fucking sugar puff started? Bears can be loud sometimes, and assertive, I think they roar. Do they roar? Quinn looked at Rachel curiously. Rachel gave her an exaggerated what the fuck face. She didn't know if bears fucking roared. Quinn shrugged and continued on happily. They can be pesky, like chase you through the woods till you die, sort of thing. Rachel snorted, and Quinn smiled. Rachel did have the persistence to chase somebody through the woods until they died. And you're fluffy sometimes, when you don't brush your hair, especially in the morning. And you have big brown eyes, and I don't know, Pooh Bear sings sometimes, and we have good bear hugs. Rachel watched with a smile as Quinn rambled on, blush building furiously, then tackled the woman in a bear hug when she finished. "I'll call you Big Bear from now on," she proclaimed, pulling back and ruffling Quinn's hair. Rachel was only half joking. She really stuck to nicknames. Santana had been known as Skunk for 3 years in college. Quinn grinned and ducked her head before she met Rachel's eyes. "Then you little bear," Quinn said logically. Shit, what had Rachel done? Fucking nicknames. She couldn't deny Quinn's excited face, though. God damn, sugar puffs. She smiled at Quinn and nodded agreeably. "No," Rachel said, trying to look serious. "Pick up the rest of your puffs, Big Bear. We'll get ants." Quinn complied, and Rachel helped. They threw them in the garbage this time, like the responsible, in quotation marks, adults they were. Quinn then pulled Rachel back on the bowls and started a contest to see who could bounce higher. They had to call Puck when Quinn put a hole in the drywall with her elbow. But it was totally worth it. End of chapter 5. My Bears. And that's Just Off the Key of Reason by iamapanda on fanfictions. I've loved this story for a long time, and I wanted to have an audiobook of it, and I thought that it would be fitting for this to be like the first one I do. But yeah, there'll definitely be more. I like to read, and I love seeing when people create stories, and I know there's like an alternate universe or like however, but it's just so interesting seeing what people do with what they see. And I love it. And I highly recommend checking out like more of this. This is not the only book that Panda has written, And I'm pretty sure they do fiction press stuff too. Thanks for listening, and hope you have good days. I'll do another 5 chapters of it at some other point in time. I'm also thinking of doing finishing up that Choice Robots game. By the way, I know it's chapter 4 the other day. I didn't forget about it. And yeah, check all my socials as Crisis Crick 6. All of my rates and stuff is in the YouTube bio. I love creating. I love reading. It's really fun doing this, and if anyone would actually want to create with me, collab, do film, however, let me know. Or if you need help with soundtracks or something, let me know. I love making music and helping people find their sounds, I just wanted to say before I ended this. Thanks, iamapanda, for writing this amazing story that I've thought about for years.
Good day to y'all, and happy 12/22/22. Cheers.